Hi, I'm Kaylin. For a whole year, I watched my nephew every weekend. No complaints, never asked for a dime. But the one time I asked my sister to feed our old dog, her husband rolled his eyes and said, "I'm not your assistant." And she looked me dead in the face and said, "No one owes you." That night I came home to silence. And a note, sharp, spiteful, final. And in that moment I realized maybe I was the family assistant all along, but what they didn't know was what I'd do next. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from, and have you ever felt used by your own family? Drop a comment below. I read every word. Most Saturdays I wake up to the sound of little feet pounding across my hardwood floor, except they're not mine. I don't have kids. Never did. But for the last year, Ryan's giggles have echoed through my quiet house like clockwork. Cartoons by 8 a.m., pancakes by 8:15. We've got our rhythm. No one asked me to create it. I just did. My name's Kaylin. I live alone in a one-bedroom just outside Columbus. I work remotely as a marketing analyst for a pet food company based out of Chicago. Most days, I don't see another soul besides the barista at the drive-thru. But come Friday night, that changes. My sister Callista drops Ryan off like it's part of some unspoken custody arrangement. "He loves spending time with you," she always says. What she means is she and Brannon are heading to a couples retreat, or a concert, or a winery in the next state over. I never ask. I just nod, smile, pull the child seat from the back of her SUV, and hoist Ryan's bag over my shoulder like a good soldier. I do the crafts. I refill the snack drawer. I sit cross-legged on the carpet teaching him how to blend consonants. I never asked for a dime, not for food, not for the stack of children's books I keep by my bed, not even for gas when I pick him up myself. It started just once. Ryan had a fever. Brannon had a golf tournament. Callista was crying on the phone. "You're the only one I trust," she'd said. The fever broke, but the weekends never stopped. I used to leave her little notes. What Ryan ate, what he dreamed about, the way he asked me if the moon followed cars. I'd tuck them into his backpack. No response. No thanks. Eventually, I stopped writing them. One weekend, while we were making paper snowflakes, Ryan asked me, "Why don't Mommy and Daddy stay with me sometimes like you do?" I just smiled and said, "They're busy, baby." But the truth sat in my throat like a stone. They weren't too busy to vacation, just too busy to be there. Over time, the small things stacked up. A friend invited me on a weekend trip to Asheville. I said no. I've got Ryan. A guy I'd been messaging for weeks asked if I could meet for brunch on a Sunday. I declined. Ryan had soccer. Even a Boston conference I was shortlisted to present at, I passed it up. "You're like the unpaid nanny," a coworker once joked. I laughed along, but that word, unpaid, clung to me. Then came the real cut. Tessa, my college roommate, was getting married in Charleston. A perfect fall weekend. I had the flight booked, dress bought. But Ryan caught strep. Callista refused to cancel her lake weekend. "I need this," she texted. "I've been so stressed." So I stayed and watched cartoons. Again. I didn't say a word. Not until the day I asked for a single favor. I had a short business trip to Indianapolis coming up. Just a weekend. Barely a blip. I texted Callista, "Hey, can you check on Miso Saturday night? Just needs her dinner and meds." Miso's my old corgi, 14 years, diabetic, sweet as pie. Callista didn't reply. Not that day. Not the next. Instead, I got a text from Brannon. "I'm not your assistant." Then, 20 minutes later from Callista, "No one owes you. We've all got our lives." I remember staring at my phone, rereading that sentence like it had been written in another language. No one owes me? I didn't fight back. Didn't even reply. I found an old neighbor, Mrs. Paget, who agreed to feed Miso for a Target gift card and a bottle of wine. I thanked her, overtipped, and left town. But something cracked, not loudly, not in a cinematic thunderclap way, more like a small splinter in my sense of belonging. That night, I came home late. The house was dark, empty. Ryan's puzzle pieces weren't scattered on the coffee table. His toothbrush was gone from the bathroom. I didn't see it at first, but there, on the kitchen table, under the soft glow of the fridge light, sat a note. Callista's handwriting. Neat. Precise. Kaylin, we've decided to take a break from depending on you. You've made us feel like a burden, like we're some obligation you resent. We need space. This isn't healthy. You're always playing the martyr, and it's exhausting. There was no love, Callista. No thank you for everything. Just that. I sat down. No tears. Just silence. I traced the edge of the paper with my finger. Dependency? The word tasted like vinegar, bitter and misplaced. After a while I stood, folded the note in half, slipped it into the drawer with the unpaid medical bills and expired coupons. Then I reached for a manila folder I hadn't touched in months, the one labeled personal, not shared. Inside was a plan, not just an escape, a reckoning. I sat for a while after folding the note, hands resting on the table, eyes lingering on the clean surface where Ryan's crayon drawings used to be. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. I could hear the hum of my fridge from the kitchen and the soft tap of Miso's tail brushing the floor beside me. Then, almost without thinking, I stood up, crossed to the hallway closet, and reached for the black file box I hadn't opened in months. My fingers found the worn tab. Personal expenses. Ryan. It wasn't labeled for drama, just habit. I never expected to need it. Back on the couch, I sat cross-legged, Miso curling up beside me like she sensed something was shifting. I flipped the folder open. Inside, rows of neatly clipped receipts, categorized by date, grocery bills with items like Cheddar Bunny snacks and organic applesauce, tickets from the Children's Science Museum, an invoice from that weekend soccer clinic Brannon insisted was too much trouble to handle. I covered it myself. There was even a yellow sticky note stuck to one receipt from February. Ryan wouldn't eat carrots but loved the blueberry muffins. Remember to bake more next weekend. I smiled faintly. That note wasn't for anyone else, just a record of trying. My thumb paused on one faded paper. His dental bill. $149. His front tooth was chipped, and they forgot their wallet that day. I paid it without blinking. No one offered to reimburse me. No one ever asked if that was okay. I didn't keep these to tally anything. I never intended to make a case out of it. I kept them the way you might save a concert ticket or a postcard, just a quiet way of holding on to time that felt meaningful. But tonight, with the note still burning in my mind, we've all got our lives. Those receipts felt different. They weren't just paper. They were the weight of a year where I didn't say no, didn't complain, didn't ask. And suddenly that line, "No one owes you," rattled through my head like a loose window in a storm. I heard it over and over, louder than Brannon's voice, louder than Callista's texts. No one owes you. No one owes you. I reached for my notebook, the one I keep for to-do lists and recipes. I turned to a blank page and wrote the phrase across the top in pen. Then I crossed it out. Wrote it again. Crossed it out again. Harder. I don't know how long I sat like that, just writing and scribbling. It felt like a tug of war inside my own chest, like I was trying to convince myself something I'd never believed. I flipped the page, took a breath, and wrote instead, "You didn't owe me, but you could have cared." My hand stilled. I stared at the words. That's what hurt, really. Not the money, not the hours. It was the erasure. I wasn't just background, I was their convenience, the free babysitter, the one who didn't have a life. They never said thank you, not once. I thought about calling Callista, saying it out loud, asking, gently, why she never told me she appreciated any of it. But the thought of hearing her shrug, or worse, hearing silence on the other end, made my stomach twist. Instead, I wrote a letter. A real one, on stationery I hadn't used since college. "Callista," I began, "I'm not mad. I'm just tired. I don't expect repayment, but I did hope for recognition. Just once. Ryan means the world to me. But I don't think I can keep pretending this doesn't take something out of me." I didn't sign it, didn't send it. I folded it, placed it in a drawer under some old envelopes, and sat back. The air felt colder now. Not bitter, but clear. A memory bubbled up, one I hadn't thought about in years. Sorrel, my college roommate and now a practicing attorney, once visited me when Ryan was 3. He was napping on the couch and we were sipping tea in the kitchen. She'd said, "If you're putting this much time and money into care, even informally, it might not be a bad idea to document it, just for your own protection." I laughed then. That's for people who don't love each other. Sorrel didn't press, but I remembered her eyes, kind but firm, like she saw a possibility I refused to look at. Now, sitting in that same kitchen, I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. My hands moved with surprising steadiness. I typed Sorrel Hernandez, Legal Consulting, into the browser, found her email, and opened a new message. Subject: Need to clarify informal agreements involving childcare and financial contribution. Body: Hi Sorrel. I hope you're well. I'd like to schedule a brief consult, nothing urgent, but I think it's time I understood what I've been giving. Thanks. I hovered over the send button, then clicked. It was late, almost midnight. I should have gone to bed, but I stayed seated for a while. The folder's still open on the coffee table. Miso had curled up again, her breathing steady and soft. I reached over, patted her head, and set an alarm for 5:45 a.m. Tomorrow was going to be ordinary, on the surface, but I'd made a shift. I wasn't owed, but I wasn't invisible either. That thought stayed with me, calm and firm, as I turned off the lights. At 6:03 a.m., my phone lit up beside the toaster. I didn't jump to check it. I let it buzz once, twice, then settle into silence again. A small, quiet power moved through me as I poured my coffee. The kitchen window still held the pale gray of early morning. Steam curled over my mug like a sigh. When I finally glanced at the screen, the message preview read, Callista. Can you watch Ryan this weekend? We're double booked. Emergency. No hi. No, sorry for the last-minute ask. Just assumption, served like it always had been, plain, blunt, and without garnish. I tapped the screen, read it again, then set the phone down next to my coffee. The same coffee I'd started making just for me. No refill requests, no child banging a spoon for attention, no last-minute he forgot his math binder. Just me, the mug, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a slow sip and looked out at the small patch of backyard I'd finally started weeding again. The hose lay coiled like a sleeping snake. A single squirrel was perched on the fence, watching me as if it, too, was waiting to see what I'd do. Hours passed. The text remained unanswered. It wasn't that I didn't want to see Ryan. That boy has my heart in places even I forget to reach. But something had shifted. I was finally starting to ask myself, what does it cost me every time I say yes? Once, years ago, I went to a therapist. One visit. I remember sitting stiffly on the edge of the couch while she sipped her herbal tea and listened. At some point, she looked at me and said, "Being the dependable one isn't the same as being valued, Kaylin." I remember forcing a laugh. I didn't go back. But today? Her words came back, not as judgment, but as a mirror. I opened a notes app on my phone and typed out a reply. "Sorry, I'm unavailable." Then I stared at it, deleted it, wrote it again. "I have plans." Delete. Maybe another time. I sighed. Locked the phone. I didn't owe her a decision under pressure. The afternoon sun was creeping across the living room floor when I heard tires crunching on the gravel driveway. I peeked through the curtain, and there she was, Callista, and in the back seat, Ryan, swinging his legs, humming something off-key. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped outside and closed it gently behind me, letting the breeze kiss my arms as I walked toward her. She waved casually, as if this were some errand she always did. "You didn't answer, so I figured you were probably fine with it," she said, opening the back door and motioning toward Ryan's backpack. "We really can't cancel." I didn't walk toward the car. I didn't smile. "Callista," I said, keeping my voice even. "You can't just assume." Her eyes blinked, slow, like she hadn't heard those words before in that tone. "I mean, you always help," she stammered. "He loves being here, and I thought you loved him?" I finished for her. She hesitated. "Well, yeah. I do love him," I said softly. "That's why I need to stop teaching him that love means erasing yourself." She froze, standing in my driveway like a statue someone forgot to put back in the museum. The words hung there, between us and the warm breeze. A curtain shifted next door. Someone was watching. They always were when Callista's voice got sharp. "Oh, come on," she snapped. "You're seriously doing this now? In front of him?" She gestured at Ryan, who was now craning his neck to watch us through the car window, eyes confused. "This is unbelievable," she muttered. "I've got to be in Denver by 7. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't match her tone. "You'll figure it out," I said. "You're resourceful." She huffed, pulled out her phone, and started dialing as she muttered something that sounded like, "I should have called Mom." That sting landed, but not where it used to. I stepped closer to Ryan's window and smiled at him. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll have time. Just not like this." He nodded slowly, eyes darting between me and his mom. Callista ended her call with an annoyed sigh. "Sage said maybe. If she finishes early. God." She turned back to me. "You're really just gonna stand there?" I didn't reply. I'd already said everything I needed to. Within minutes, she pulled out of the driveway, faster than necessary. A gust of dust swept up around my legs, then settled as quickly as it came. I walked back inside. No applause, no dramatic music, just the hush of a home finally starting to belong to me again. I brewed a second cup of coffee, not out of habit, out of choice. That night I fell asleep earlier than I expected, and in the morning when the light spilled across the garage, something made me step outside before my usual routine. That's when I saw them. Ryan's toys, a worn soccer ball, a plastic dinosaur, the battered library book I'd once read to him 6 times in a row. They were piled in the corner of the driveway, neatly, deliberately, a silent message. The morning sun had barely begun to rise when I stepped into the garage. I hadn't even reached for my coffee yet. The air was still cool, the kind of crisp that usually made me feel alert and clean. But what stopped me cold wasn't the temperature. It was the sight right in front of me. Scattered across the edge of my driveway was a small pile of toys. At first, I thought maybe some neighborhood kids had left something behind, but then I saw the plastic fire truck. Its chipped red side, one of the wheels slightly bent, brought back a clear image. Ryan, grinning ear to ear, unwrapping it on Christmas morning. I had driven across town to find that exact model. He had insisted he wanted the kind with the ladder that goes up, not the boring kind. The other toys were all familiar. A soft, stuffed dog I gave him when he had the flu and couldn't sleep alone. The little puzzle pieces we'd sat with for hours. A bouncy ball that still had his initials written in my handwriting. Some were clean. Others clearly weren't. A few were stuffed into a ripped grocery bag like they were garbage. Taped to the side of the fire truck was a note, scribbled on the back of what looked like a bill envelope. "You made your choice. Don't expect us to come crawling?" No name, but I knew the handwriting like I knew my own. Callista. I stood there for what must have been several minutes, just staring. It wasn't the words that hit hardest. It was the delivery. No call, no knock. Just a silent message made of plastic, dirt, and spite. I gathered the toys slowly, one by one. My fingers hesitated over the note. I didn't rip it. I folded it and slipped it into my sweater pocket. Maybe because a part of me didn't want to forget how low she was willing to go. Back inside, I placed everything on the kitchen floor, then sat down beside it. No music, no TV, just me and a growing ache I didn't want to name. I picked up the fire truck again, running my thumb across its scratched roof. My mind drifted, not by choice. Memories surged through like a current I couldn't stop. Ryan in his dinosaur pajamas calling me Ka before he could say Kaylin. The night he had a fever and Callista was at a work dinner, unreachable. I'd sat beside his tiny bed all night, damp cloth on his forehead, reading story after story until his little body relaxed against the pillow. And now this, tossed toys on concrete. It was grief, not the kind that screams, but the kind that folds you in from the inside. I didn't cry. Not yet. Around 3 that afternoon, my phone rang. I let it ring twice before picking up. Part of me hoped it wasn't her. It wasn't. It was Margaret, our mother. "Kaylin," she said, her voice as tired as I remembered. "What's going on between you and Callista? She called me in tears this morning." I waited a beat. "Did she mention why she was crying?" "She said you embarrassed her, refused to take Ryan when she needed you." My jaw clenched. "That's true. I did say no." Calmly. At my own front door. A pause. "You know how your sister is," Margaret said. "Maybe next time, just go along for peace." I could almost hear the shrug in her voice. That practiced neutrality she wore like a cardigan, thin, convenient, and always there when real warmth was needed. "Mom," I said, my tone sharper than I intended, "there might not be a next time." She exhaled. "I'm just saying, families need each other." I looked around the room, at the fire truck, the broken stuffed dog, the absence of anything that felt like family. My voice came out quiet, but steady. "Then maybe they should act like it." She didn't respond. The line hung silent for a few moments before she said, "Well, I hope you two can work it out." And then she hung up. I didn't move for a while. That evening, just before sunset, I went out to check the mailbox. The air had grown still and heavy, like something was holding its breath. I opened the box and found a single envelope, folded unevenly and sealed with Scotch tape. There was no return address. Inside was a drawing, crayon on notebook paper, stick figures, 3 of them, one tall with long brown hair, that was me, one small with messy lines for curls, Ryan, and one with an angry red mouth, clearly meant to be Callista. My heart tightened. Below the drawing was a short audio clip on a small USB stick taped inside the envelope. I plugged it into my phone. A tiny voice crackled through, "Auntie Kay, I love you. Sorry Mommy's mad. I still love you." The last words were whispered, like a secret. That did it. I sat on the porch steps, holding the drawing in both hands, and let the tears fall. Not loud, not dramatic, just a slow release, a breaking that didn't shatter me, but cleared space for something sturdier underneath. I didn't text back, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to protect something in me that had been bleeding out for far too long. Ryan had reached across the chasm with nothing but crayons and love, and I would never let that go, but I also wouldn't keep letting them drag me under. 2 nights later, I came home from the grocery store and found my dog locked inside the laundry room, shivering and covered in something foul. The night air had turned damp, clinging to my skin as I turned the corner back toward my house. My short walk was meant to clear my mind, to shake off the silence that had settled deep in my bones since Ryan's drawing. But the quiet wasn't peaceful tonight. It felt off. Not the gentle kind that wraps around you, the kind that presses too hard, like it's waiting. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer. Something in the air had shifted. Benny didn't greet me. No scampering paws, no soft bark, just stillness. "Benny," I called, moving toward the kitchen. That's when I heard it, a soft, broken whimper from the hallway. I followed the sound to the laundry room. The door was shut. I hadn't shut that door. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the knob. The moment it opened, Benny bolted out, tail between his legs, body trembling. My heart clenched. He was soaked, sticky, and stank of something sharp. Vinegar? I dropped to my knees and held him close. My fingers came away slick with raw egg yolk. What in God's name? The laundry room told the rest of the story. His food bowl? Gone? His bed? Slashed open like someone took a knife to it in a fit of rage, and in the corner, barely noticeable, a crumpled paper towel sprayed with a familiar perfume. Callista's, orange blossom, and that synthetic vanilla she wore since college. Always a little too strong, too sweet. There was no sign of forced entry, no windows broken, no damage to the doors. She had a key. I sat there for minutes that felt like hours. The rage came slowly this time. It wasn't loud or theatrical. It was heavy, cold, settling into me like wet cement. This wasn't a warning. This wasn't just about toys anymore. It was personal. I stood and moved through the house with mechanical precision, checking each lock, snapping photos of the damage. I documented everything. Benny followed close, still trembling, and I made a silent vow. Never again. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up installing the security cameras I had ordered months ago but never bothered to put up. I changed the batteries in every motion sensor light. At 3 a.m., I sent a message to Inez. Me. Need to talk harassment. Are eggs and dog abuse enough to file a report? She called me first thing in the morning. Kaylin, I need you to breathe, she said. It's disgusting, yes, but unless there's footage or a witness, you can't prove it's her. Not legally. But I know her scent, I said, my voice flat. Her handwriting was on the toy truck. Now this. I believe you, she said gently, but belief isn't enough in court. Keep documenting. If she comes back, that's your moment. After we hung up, I walked Benny down the street and back. Every few steps, he'd pause and look back at the house. I understood. It didn't feel like home either. 3 days passed in a strange fog. No word from Mom, no response from Callista. It felt like I was orbiting some family I used to belong to, but could no longer reach. And then the text came. A group thread, the whole family included. Subject, dinner, this Sunday. Mom's house, 6 p.m. Let's all catch up, no drama, just love. But my message, mine had a line beneath it that none of the others did. Kaylin, if you're still feeling sensitive, maybe skip this one. No drama, please. No drama. Like my silence had been a tantrum, like Ryan's voice message was a glitch in the family programming, like the egg yolk soaking into my dog's fur was something I'd imagined. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing one word. Understood. Not yes, not no, just understood, and I meant it. They thought they could twist the narrative, that I'd bend to keep the peace like always. But I'd learned something over the past week. Silence isn't surrender. It can be a weapon sharpened by truth. The porch light flickered when I stepped onto the front step of my mother's house. It used to be a soft yellow glow, warm and inviting. Tonight, it buzzed like a warning. I adjusted the beige scarf around my neck and smoothed the hem of my coat before pressing the doorbell. The chime rang, and I heard feet shuffle inside. A second later, Callista opened the door. Her smile was instant, but her eyes darted sideways before settling on me. Kaylin, you came, she said, her tone light as if we were old college friends and not sisters who hadn't spoken since the dog. Of course, I replied, stepping in. The air smelled like rosemary and garlic, Mom's roast lamb. But beneath it was something else. Artificial, like lilac room spray or Callista's usual perfume. I couldn't tell where one scent ended and the other began. Inside, everyone was already gathered. My chair was tucked near the hallway, halfway between the dining room and the coat closet, far from the head of the table where Mom always sat. My brother-in-law, Nick, waved with a too big grin. Hey, look who's here, and without the mutt, he said, laughing at his own joke. The others chuckled, then quickly turned their eyes to their plates. I smiled politely and set my gift, a bottle of wine, on the counter, untouched. We went through the motions, toasts, small bites. I passed the potatoes without speaking. Callista reached over me twice without a word. Mom asked Nick how his job was going but didn't ask me anything. Not even about my work, not even about me. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself. Just refilling my water. In the kitchen, I took my time. The pitcher was right there, but I stood at the counter, back turned, fingers resting on the cool tile. Their voices carried over from the dining room, too loud to be cautious, too comfortable to imagine I'd hear. She just sulks, my mother said. "I can't handle Kaylin's moods anymore." "Seriously?" Callista chimed in, fork clinking against her plate. "She acts like we owe her for babysitting all those years, like it was some grand sacrifice. She's not even a real mom." My hand tightened around the glass. I kept breathing. Nick's voice followed. "I mean, come on. She's pushing 40 and still single. There's gotta be a reason, right?" A few forks paused. Someone coughed lightly. Then Mom's voice, quiet but sharp. "She always needed attention. That's all this is." They laughed again, this time softer, more cruel. I turned around slowly. The light above me hummed as I walked down the hallway, water glass still in hand. I paused where the shadows met the edge of the dining room. No one looked my way. They hadn't noticed I was gone, or maybe they had and didn't care. I set the glass gently on the hallway table beside an old ceramic bowl. My coat was still hanging by the door. I slipped it on without a word. The door didn't creak. My footsteps on the porch didn't echo. As I reached the sidewalk, a breeze brushed against my cheek, and I realized I was trembling. Not from the cold, but from clarity. Not anger, not pain. Just stillness. That night, I sat on my living room floor with my laptop open and the family group chat glowing at the top of the screen. I didn't say anything, no dramatic exit, no message typed or deleted, just a quiet action. Leave group. Then, delete thread. I stared at the blank screen for a few seconds, the cursor blinking in place like it was waiting for me to grieve. But I didn't. Instead, I opened a folder I'd started 2 weeks earlier. It was labeled plainly, Family. Inside were screenshots of text messages, photos of my vandalized laundry room, call logs, and voice notes I'd recorded right after each incident. I added a new entry, tonight's date, and wrote down what I heard, word for word. I wasn't collecting memories anymore. I was collecting facts. I clicked save and closed the laptop. Then I leaned back, let out a slow breath, and whispered, "No more." The next morning, sunlight had barely crept through the blinds when I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and dialed Inez. My hand didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. "I'm ready," I said. She didn't ask for clarification. "Come over. Bring everything." It was quiet on the drive to her office, a small converted bungalow tucked behind a row of aging maple trees. I'd packed the shoebox carefully, every screenshot, voicemail, even those handwritten notes I found stuffed in old purses. The receipts were crinkled and faded, some dated back nearly 3 years. I didn't know if any of it mattered. I just knew I couldn't carry it alone anymore. Inez greeted me at the door in house slippers and a sweater that said, "Not today, Satan." She led me past the entryway and into her den, where legal pads and highlighters were already waiting. She didn't offer small talk, just a look that said, "I've seen women snap. I've seen women rebuild." "Let's see what we've got," she said. I set the box down. "It's all here." She didn't rush. She sifted through slowly, pausing every few pages, sometimes raising an eyebrow, sometimes letting out a low whistle. When she came across the message where my sister said, "We need you Thursday. Don't make it complicated like last time." Inez held it up between 2 fingers like it stank. "Tell me about this one." I leaned back, arms folded. "That was when I said I had a doctor's appointment and couldn't babysit. She told Mom I was being dramatic." Inez gave a small nod, jotting something on her pad. "Kaylin, this isn't just a pattern. This is a case." I stared at her. "But it's family." She met my eyes. "Which doesn't make it less damaging. You provided unpaid labor that allowed them to run their business. You've got bank transfers, text confirmations, even voice messages. I don't think you want to go scorched earth, but you do have options." We sat with that for a while. I watched her scribble words like emotional duress and implied obligation. "What are we talking about? A lawsuit?" "Small claims court, potentially, or something gentler but firm. A cease and desist, a legal boundary, no courtroom, no press, just a line in the sand." The idea of suing my mother made my stomach knot. But I couldn't deny the reality anymore. They hadn't just taken advantage of my time, they had rewritten my place in the family like I didn't exist outside of service. "I want peace," I said, "but not if it means being erased." Inez nodded again, softer now. "Then we draw the line, paper and ink." That evening, after I got home, I opened every closet door in my apartment. I pulled out the stuffed animals, the little backpack with his name on it, the blanket that still smelled faintly like fruit snacks and Play-Doh. I didn't cry. I packed them into a large canvas bag and drove them to a donation center down the street. I handed them over without explanation. On the way back, I stopped for groceries, not because I needed anything, but because walking through the aisles grounded me. The coldness of the freezer section, the hum of fluorescent lights, the quiet nods of other tired women buying their weekly eggs and oat milk, it made me feel like a person again. Not a placeholder, not a servant, just me. At home, I sat at my desk, opened a blank document and typed, "To whom it may concern," but then I deleted it, too stiff. Instead, I wrote, "I release myself from any further obligations or expectations. I wish you well. I ask for no reply." I attached the cease and desist letter Inez had helped me notarize and added one more thing, a spreadsheet. I'd built it earlier that afternoon, painstakingly logging every date, every hour, every task they'd asked of me over the last 2.5 years. School pickups, 48 hours, weekend overnights, 126 hours emergency sick days, 19 hours errands and pickups, 33 hours emotional support calls, 67 documented minutes, missed work, 3 unpaid shifts, total estimated time, 301 hours, hourly base, 40-hour total value, $12,140. At the bottom I wrote, "This is not a bill, this is a mirror." I didn't send it that night. I wanted to sleep on it. But the next morning, as I was folding laundry, my phone lit up. A message from my sister, "Mom wants you to bring dessert Sunday. Don't forget again." The boldness of it, the normalcy of it, like the last few days hadn't happened, like my presence was still assumed. I stared at the screen for a long time. I could almost hear her voice, sugary and careless. I typed back only one sentence. "Check your mail tomorrow." Then I placed the envelope in the outgoing box and walked to the corner to drop it in the mailbox. As it slid out of my hand, I felt no fear, just a quiet resolve. I wasn't walking away in anger. I was walking back toward myself. I didn't expect them to respond, but 3 days later, they did. I was cleaning the sink when the phone rang, not a text, not an email, an actual phone call from my mother. I dried my hands slowly, let it ring twice more, and picked up. No greeting. "Your sister is devastated," she said sharply. "Why would you do something so hateful?" There was no warmth in her voice, just a cold, flat edge I hadn't heard since I was a teenager getting lectured for crying too loudly when I was sick. I didn't answer right away. I leaned on the counter, watched a sunbeam fall across the tile floor. "I'm curious," I said quietly. "Why do you think I did it?" "I don't want to argue, Kaylin." "That's not what I asked." Silence, then a sharp exhale, and she hung up. I stood there with the dial tone in my ear until it clicked off. The quiet that followed was strange, not peaceful, just empty. And in that emptiness I realized how little space they'd ever made for my voice. That night, a message buzzed through. From Lila. "Dinner tomorrow, just us, to clear the air." No apology, just an invitation disguised as something soft. I didn't reply right away. I stared at the screen long enough for it to dim out. Then I tapped back, "Sure, 6 works." The next evening I drove slowly. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but my chest felt like it was packed with sand. The lights on their street hadn't changed. Same wreath on the porch since Easter, same cracked bird bath. I parked, sat still for a beat, then grabbed my folder from the passenger seat. The front door opened before I knocked. My father. "Come in," he said, stepping aside like a hotel doorman. The house smelled like lemon-scented cleaner, not dinner. I glanced around. No table set, No dishes, no warmth. I walked in slowly. They were all there. Lila on the couch, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Greg beside her, arms crossed, lips tight. My mother sitting straight-backed in the recliner, one hand resting on her lap like she was holding court. My father took a seat at the edge of the fireplace, like a moderator. It was an ambush. Lila was the first to speak. Her voice cracked. I just don't understand how you could humiliate me like that. You know people saw it, right? I had to explain to Mom what you meant by that spreadsheet. What were you thinking, Kaylin? Her mascara had smudged beneath one eye. I noticed she'd straightened her hair, probably to look more composed. Greg leaned forward, his voice sharp and low. You really think you're some sort of martyr, huh? Vindictive little accountant with a chip on her shoulder. Congratulations, you finally made us look bad. I said nothing. My mother's turn. This isn't how we solve things. Kaylin, sweetheart, you're not a child anymore. We need to move forward. Families forgive. Families hold each other up. Please, remember the meaning of family. I looked at each of them in turn. Then I sat down, calm and deliberate, and placed my folder on my lap. You think I'm the problem? I opened the folder, slid 3 copies across the coffee table, 1 to each of them. Lila didn't touch hers. Greg snatched his up and glanced over it like he was reviewing a contract. My mother didn't move. That, I said, is what family has meant to you for the past 3 years. Free childcare, pet sitting, grocery pickups, airport drop-offs, all while I was working night shifts and patching holes in my studio walls with duct tape. You kept track? Lila's voice rose, shaky. You actually sat there and counted? Yes. I kept my voice even, like I was reading off a receipt at a store. That's 314 hours of unpaid labor, $1,240. If I charged minimum wage, I never asked for a cent, never expected one, but I did expect respect, not to be dismissed, not to be forgotten. Lila snatched the paper and ripped it straight down the middle. You're so obsessed with being the victim, she hissed. I didn't flinch, just folded my hands in my lap. This was never about the money, I said, eyes steady on hers. It was about silence, silence that was expected of me, and I've decided I'm done mistaking that for love. Greg opened his mouth, probably to throw another insult, but I reached into the folder one more time. I wanted to give you one last thing before I go. I placed my phone on the table and hit play. My voice didn't come through the speaker. Hers did. Lila, months ago, laughing into a voicemail. She's lucky we even talked to her. Honestly, she owes us for not leaving her in that crappy studio apartment. The air in the room shifted. Greg looked at her. My mother's mouth parted slightly. My father rubbed his forehead. I stood up, smoothed my coat. Their faces were a blend of disbelief and something they hadn't shown me in years, uncertainty. I met each of their eyes, not as a daughter or a sister, just as a woman who'd finally had enough. I didn't look back. I just stood still for a second, enough to register the bitter chill in the air and the quiet hum of the refrigerator behind me. My voice was steady when I said it. I don't owe you, not loyalty, not presence, not silence. No one moved. Not even my mother, who had spent the entire evening with her eyes flicking between me and the torn pieces of the spreadsheet on the floor. Then my father finally spoke, not with the fury I'd braced for, but something softer, tired. You'll regret this when we're gone. I turned to face him. There was no sadness left in me for this moment. You've been gone for a long time, I said and walked out. I didn't slam the door. It closed behind me like it had 100 other times, but this time it felt final. The cold outside didn't bite, or maybe it did and I didn't care. My hands trembled a little as I unlocked my car, but it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline finally leaving my body after holding me upright through that whole circus. I drove with the windows cracked, no music, just the wind and the city lights stretching beside me. About halfway home, I took a detour, instinct more than thought. The animal shelter wasn't far. I hadn't been there since everything with my family started to unravel. It used to be my quiet place, back when silence still felt safe. The lights were low inside, but the night staff let me in. I walked slowly past the rows of kennels, the smell of disinfectant and fur somehow grounding. Then I saw her, tiny, quiet, curled up in the back of her cage, but when I crouched, she stood and walked right to the bars. Her eyes were the same warm brown as Jasper, the dog they forgot in our childhood yard when they left for vacation and didn't tell me. I didn't say anything, just sat there a minute and let her sniff my hand. On the way out, I filled out the preliminary foster form. "We'll call you tomorrow," the staffer said. I nodded. "I'll be ready." By the time I got home, it was past 10. I slipped off my shoes, turned on the lamp by the couch, and stared at the familiar hum of my studio. Everything was quiet, still. I poured a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling past the endless chain of messages from the group chat. Photos, guilt trips, clipped reminders of birthdays no one ever remembered mine for. Without hesitation, I opened the settings. Leave group, delete thread, block, done. The silence after was not empty. It was clean. I picked up the phone again, called my landlord, and confirmed I'd be renewing my lease. Then I opened my laptop and drafted a short email. Subject, promotion, acceptance. I hit send. The job in Seattle wasn't just a title or a raise, it was freedom in the shape of a one-way ticket and a new office overlooking something besides my parents' shadows. I got up and grabbed an empty box from the closet. One by one I started folding clothes, stacking books, gently wrapping the mug I always reached for but never let them see. There was no rush. I didn't need to escape. I was just moving forward. Around midnight, I sat down with my journal, one I hadn't touched in weeks. I flipped past pages filled with aching questions and lonely scribbles until I found a blank one. Then I wrote, "To the version of me that begged to be loved. You don't have to beg anymore." I closed the book, let out a long, slow breath, and smiled. The next morning I woke early, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I made coffee, watered the plants, filled the dog bowl I'd bought on the way home, even though no paws had stepped into my apartment yet, but they would. I took out the trash, tying the bag neatly, locking the door behind me. As I stepped out into the crisp morning air, I reached for the latch on the gate. The little iron gate that squeaked when you didn't hold it right. This time, I held it right. I closed it behind me and clicked the lock into place. Not to keep anyone out, just to protect the peace I'd finally made inside. Across the lot, the mailbox flap clattered shut just as I turned. I walked over, pulled the small bundle of letters out, and paused. No return address, just my name in my mother's handwriting. I opened it there on the sidewalk. Inside was a check, blank on the signature line, for $5,000. Tucked behind it, a yellow sticky note. Just in case. I stared at it, felt nothing. Then I ripped it in half and dropped it into the trash bin next to the recycling. When I got upstairs, I opened the windows, let the breeze in, and turned on my favorite playlist, the one no one ever wanted to hear on family road trips. And I danced.